The summer sun cast long shadows across the weathered porch as Katherine Norris stared at her empty, calloused hands, her stomach growling with a hunger that had become her constant companion since burying her husband 3 months prior. The once prosperous farm had withered along with Henry's life, leaving her with nothing but debt and desperation in the unforgiving terrain of New Mexico Territory. 1883. The dust from the approaching rider caught her attention before she could make out his figure. Katherine tucked a loose strand of her auburn hair behind her ear and straightened her threadbare dress, pride still burning within her despite the hollow ache in her belly. The stranger rode tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the setting sun as he guided his chestnut stallion toward her isolated homestead. "Evening, madam," he called out, tipping his worn hat, his voice carried across the yard, deep yet gentle. "Mind if I water my horse?" "Been riding since dawn." Katherine nodded silently, gesturing toward the well. She watched as he dismounted with fluid grace, his movements betraying years of life on horseback. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 to her 26 years, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Name's Adam Keene," he said, approaching the porch after tending to his horse. He carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Heading to Santa Fe, but my supplies are weighing down my saddlebags something fierce. Thought perhaps you might help me lighten the load." She saw through his thinly veiled charity immediately, noting how his gaze had assessed the barren farm, the empty clothesline, and her too thin frame. Katherine's first instinct was to refuse. She'd rather starve than accept pity, but the gnawing pain in her stomach overrode her pride. "Katherine Norris," she replied, her voice raspy from disuse. "I reckon I could help you with that burden, Mr. Keene." Adam unwrapped the bundle, revealing a freshly baked loaf of bread, a hunk of cheese, and dried beef. The aroma made Katherine's mouth water embarrassingly, but she maintained her composure as he placed the food on the small table beside her rocking chair. "Would you share this meal with me, Mrs. Norris?" he asked, those storm-gray eyes holding hers without judgment. Something in his respectful tone broke through her defenses. "It's been a while since I've had proper company," she admitted. As they ate, Katherine found herself sharing pieces of her story, how Henry had succumbed to pneumonia after falling through river ice while fishing, how the bank was threatening to claim her land, how the drought had destroyed what little crops she'd managed to plant alone. "A woman shouldn't have to face such hardship on her own," Adam said quietly as darkness fell around them. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that caught the last rays of sunlight. "I found this while panning gold up north. Never found much use for it, but maybe it could help you." In his palm lay a simple gold band with a small, rough-cut diamond. "The general store in town would give you fair price for it. Might keep the bank away another month or two." Katherine stared at the ring, then at the kind stranger who'd appeared like an answer to prayers she'd been too proud to utter. "I couldn't possibly. I've no use for pretty things on the trail," he insisted, taking her hand and placing the ring in her palm, closing her fingers around it. The warmth of his touch sent an unexpected spark through her, reminding her she was still alive despite the months of merely existing. Little did Katherine know that this moment, a hungry widow, an act of kindness, bread shared at sunset, and a gold ring passing between strangers would mark the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. As night settled fully over the homestead, Katherine reluctantly lit her last precious candle. The flickering light illuminated Adam's face, revealing a thin scar running along his jawline. "You should save that," he said, nodding toward the candle. "I've got no problem finding my way to the barn to bed down." "Nonsense," Katherine replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "There's a spare room. It's modest, but it's better than hay and horse blankets." Adam studied her for a moment. "That's mighty kind, but I wouldn't want to impose or cause talk. A widow alone with a stranger." Katherine almost smiled. "Mr. Keene, my nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. Unless the coyotes start gossiping, I think my reputation will remain intact." For the first time, she saw a genuine smile break across his face, transforming his serious features. "Fair enough, Mrs. Norris." As she showed him to the small room that had once belonged to the child she and Henry had hoped for, but never conceived, Katherine found herself wondering about this man. His hands were calloused like a working man's, but he carried himself with an education that suggested he hadn't always been a drifter. "If you don't mind my asking, what takes you to Santa Fe?" she inquired, placing a folded quilt at the foot of the narrow bed. Adam set his saddlebags on the floor. "I've taken a position as foreman at the Circle M Ranch. Owners getting on in years need someone to manage the operation." "You're settling down then?" Something flashed in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or uncertainty. "For a spell, at least." 7 years on the move is long enough for any man. Katherine nodded, understanding more than he realized. After Henry died, she'd contemplated leaving countless times, starting fresh somewhere else. But this land, however unforgiving, was all she had left. "Well, good night, Mr. Keene." "I thank you again for your kindness." "Adam," he corrected gently. "Mr. Keene was my father." "Adam," she echoed, the name feeling strangely intimate on her lips. "Then I'm Katherine." That night, Katherine lay awake longer than usual, the gold ring clutched in her palm. She could hear the occasional creak of floorboards from the spare room, evidence that her unexpected guest was also finding sleep elusive. The bread had filled her stomach, but it was the simple human connection that had somehow fed something deeper within her, something she'd thought had died alongside Henry. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the worn curtains. Katherine rose early as was her habit, dressing quickly in her second-best dress, a practical blue cotton that had faded with numerous washings. She hesitated before pinning her hair, taking more care than usual before chiding herself for such vanity. The smell of coffee greeted her as she entered the kitchen. Adam stood at her small stove, his sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms as he tended to a pan of something that made her mouth water. "Hope you don't mind," he said without turning. "Found some eggs in your henhouse." "Your hens are mighty productive despite the poor conditions." "They're stubborn creatures," Katherine replied, pouring herself coffee from the pot he'd prepared. "Refuse to give up even when sense says they should." Adam glanced over his shoulder, those gray eyes seeing too much. "Sounds like someone else I've recently met." The blush that warmed her cheeks took her by surprise. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt anything but numb or desperate. Over breakfast, the first proper one she'd had in months, Adam asked about her farm, listening intently as she explained the irrigation problems, the fences that needed mending, the roof that leaked during the infrequent but violent rainstorms. "I could stay a day or two," he offered after she finished. "Help with the worst of it. The Circle M won't miss me for another week." Pride warred with practicality in Katherine's mind. "I couldn't ask that of you." "You didn't ask, I offered." His direct gaze held no pity, only a straightforward assessment. 2 days of work might make the difference between keeping this place and losing it. Katherine twisted the gold ring that she'd placed on her finger for safekeeping. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Adam's expression softened slightly. "Maybe I'm tired of being a stranger everywhere I go." The simple honesty in his words resonated with her own loneliness. Katherine nodded, accepting his offer with a grace that preserved her dignity. They worked side by side that day under the relentless New Mexico sun. Adam mended fences while Katherine cleared irrigation ditches. He repaired her leaking roof while she tended to her small garden. By sundown, they moved together with the easy rhythm of partners who'd worked alongside each other for years, rather than hours. Over another simple but satisfying supper, Adam spoke sparingly of his past orphaned at 12, taken in by a cattle rancher who taught him the business. Years spent driving herds north before the railroads changed everything, then drifting from job to job across the territories. "And you. How did you end up here?" he asked, passing her the last piece of cornbread. Katherine hesitated, then shared her story. Daughter of a schoolteacher in Pennsylvania, married at 19 to Henry Norris, who dreamed of building an empire in the West. Their journey by wagon to this harsh but beautiful land. The years of struggle and hope. "Henry always believed next year would be better," she said softly. "Even at the end, he was planning spring planting." Adam nodded, understanding the unspoken grief. "Hope can be a gift and a curse out here. Which is it for you?" she asked. His eyes met hers across the table. "I'm still deciding." That night, Katherine dreamed of her late husband for the first time in weeks. But instead of the usual nightmare of finding him half frozen by the river, Henry was smiling, nodding toward the horizon as if showing her something important. She woke feeling strangely peaceful, the gold ring warm on her finger. The second day of work proved even more productive. Adam discovered why her well was producing less water and fixed the problem with ingenious simplicity. Katherine rediscovered skills she'd forgotten she possessed as they worked together to repair her chicken coop and smoke the rabbit Adam had trapped at dawn. By evening, exhaustion settled into her bones, but it was the satisfying kind she hadn't felt in months. When Adam built a small fire outside rather than retreating indoors, Katherine joined him, wrapping herself in a shawl against the cooling desert air. "Your land has good bones," he commented, stoking the flames. "With the right care, it could thrive again," Katherine sighed. "Perhaps. But not with one pair of hands and no capital for seed or livestock." "The ring should fetch enough to give you a start," Adam said. Katherine twisted it on her finger. "I've been thinking about that. The nearest town with a jeweler who'd give a fair price is 2 days' ride." "I can't leave the farm unattended that long." Adam studied the fire. "I could take it to Santa Fe for you, send back the money." "A man I've known 2 days." Katherine raised an eyebrow. "That would be foolish." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Yes, it would." The firelight cast shadows across his features, highlighting the strength in his profile. Katherine found herself wondering what circumstances had carved the occasional sadness she glimpsed in his eyes. "Tell me something true, Adam Keene," she said suddenly. "Something you've never told another soul." He looked surprised, then thoughtful. After a long moment, he spoke. "I've been running from something for 7 years, but I'm not sure what it is anymore." The simple confession hung in the air between them. "Your turn," he said softly. Katherine stared into the flames. "Sometimes I'm grateful Henry died in winter, when the ground was frozen too hard to dig a proper grave." At his questioning look, she continued, "The neighbors helped me bury him beneath a large boulder instead. I like thinking of him under stone rather than dirt." "Solid, protected." She swallowed hard. "Is that terrible?" "No," Adam replied. "It's human." They sat in companionable silence until the fire burned down to embers. When Katherine finally rose to retire, Adam stood as well, suddenly closer than she'd expected. In the dim light, she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, smell the clean scent of soap and honest sweat. "I should leave at first light," he said, his voice lower than usual. "The Circle M is expecting me." Katherine nodded, ignoring the inexplicable disappointment that tightened her chest. "Of course, you've done more than enough already." "Katherine," the way he said her name made her breath catch. "I could come back, check on how you're faring." She should refuse, maintain her independence, protect what was left of her heart. Instead, she heard herself say, "I'd like that." Morning came too quickly. Katherine rose before dawn to prepare provisions for Adam's journey, packing dried beef, biscuits, and the last of her precious coffee. When he emerged from the spare room, his saddlebags already packed, a strange tension filled the small kitchen. "I'll be back through in a month's time," he said, accepting the bundle of food. "Sooner if I can manage it." Katherine nodded, suddenly unable to find words. This man had been a stranger 3 days ago, yet his departure left her feeling untethered. At the door, Adam paused. "The ring," he said. "You should keep it safe until I return." Katherine looked down at the gold band on her finger. "Perhaps you should take it, sell it in Santa Fe as we discussed." Adam shook his head. "That ring looks right where it is." Before she could respond, he stepped closer, his calloused hand gently lifting her chin. "May I write to you, Katherine Norris?" "Yes," she whispered, hypnotized by the intensity in his storm-gray eyes. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and more surprisingly, she realized she wanted him to. Instead, he tipped his hat and stepped back. "Until next time," he said, his voice carrying a promise that warmed her more thoroughly than the morning sun breaking over the horizon. Katherine watched from the porch as Adam rode away, the dust from his horses, hooves rising like mist in the early light. She absently twisted the gold ring on her finger, wondering if he truly would return, or if, like so many promises in this harsh land, his words would evaporate like morning dew under the unforgiving sun. 2 weeks passed. Katherine threw herself into the work of the farm with renewed vigor, implementing many of Adam's suggestions. The irrigation ran smoother now, the chickens produced more eggs in their repaired coop, and she'd even managed to trade extra eggs for a few supplies at a neighboring farm. On the 16th day, a rider approached. Katherine's heart leapt before she recognized the weathered face of Emmett Walsh, who carried mail and news between isolated homesteads for a small fee. "Morning, Mrs. Norris," he called, dismounting stiffly. "Got something for you." Katherine tried to hide her disappointment as she accepted the letter, noting the unfamiliar handwriting. Opening it, she found herself staring at a bank draft for $20 more money than she'd seen in months and a brief note. "Katherine, the cattle drive arrived early. Enclosed is an advance on my wages. Consider it payment for room and board. I've spoken with Johnson at the feed store in Cimarron. This draft will secure seed and supplies in my name. He's expecting you." "Adam, good news?" Emmett asked, noting her expression. Katherine composed herself. "Just business matters." After Emmett departed, Katherine read the note again. $20 would indeed purchase enough seed and perhaps even a few head of livestock. With careful management, she might actually save the farm. But the presumption of it sending money without her consent, making arrangements on her behalf, both irritated and touched her. 3 days later, Katherine rode to Cimarron, the first time she'd left her property since Henry's death. Johnson at the feed store greeted her with unexpected respect. "Mrs. Norris, Mr. Keene said you'd be coming. Fine man, that one. Said you've got the best grazing land in the territory if it gets the right attention." Katherine raised an eyebrow. "Did he now?" "Yes, madam, left specific instructions about what you'd need." Johnson consulted a list. "Seed corn, wheat, proper tools, and such. Said to tell you he'd be by to help with planting when he returns next week." Next week. Katherine's heart quickened. She hadn't expected him back so soon. As Johnson gathered her supplies, Katherine noticed a newspaper on the counter, open to a story about a robbery at the Santa Fe bank. 3 men killed, including a teller. "The criminals still at large? Terrible business," Johnson commented, following her gaze. "They say one of the robbers was injured. Army's got patrols looking for them all through the territory." Katherine nodded absently, her mind already planning where to plant the wheat versus the corn, calculating how many chickens she could afford to add to her flock. For the first time in months, she felt something like hope taking root. The week passed in a flurry of activity as Katherine prepared for planting. Each day, she found herself glancing toward the horizon, watching for dust that would signal a rider approaching. When Adam finally appeared, she was kneeling in the garden, her hands deep in the newly turned soil. "You've been busy," he called, dismounting with that same fluid grace she remembered. Katherine stood, brushing dirt from her skirt, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. "Your presumptuous gift made it possible." Adam approached, looking somewhat thinner than before, his skin more deeply tanned. "Are you angry?" "I should be," she admitted. "A woman in my position can't afford to be beholden." "It's not charity, Katherine." His gaze was steady. its investment in good land and a better farmer. She studied him, noting the new lines of fatigue around his eyes, the way he favored his left side slightly. "You're injured." A flash of something alarm crossed his features before he shrugged. "Broke up a fight between ranch hands my first week. Nothing serious." Katherine wasn't entirely convinced, but she let it pass. "Well, since you're so invested in my farm, you can help me plant that expensive seed you purchased." The smile that spread across his face reminded her of sunshine breaking through clouds. "Yes, madam." They settled into a rhythm over the next few days. Adam's knowledge of farming matched his skill with livestock, and Katherine found herself admiring his methodical approach to every task. They worked from dawn until dusk, speaking little during the day, but sharing increasingly personal conversations over supper each evening. Katherine learned about Adam's travels through Colorado and Wyoming, his brief stint as a silver miner, the books he read whenever he could find them. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Pennsylvania, her father's devotion to education, her mother's lessons in running a household. "Why did you marry Henry?" Adam asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching stars appear in the vast New Mexico sky. Katherine considered the question. "He had dreams bigger than our small town. I wanted to see what lay beyond the boundaries I'd always known." She smiled at the memory. "And he could dance like no one I'd ever seen, swept me right off my feet at the Harvest Festival. Do you regret coming west?" Adam's voice was quiet. "No," Katherine answered honestly. "It's been harder than I imagined, and losing Henry was." She swallowed. "But this land gets in your blood. I can't imagine leaving it now." Adam nodded, understanding without words. After a moment he asked, "May I see where he's buried?" The request surprised her, but Katherine led him to the large boulder on the eastern edge of the property. The setting sun cast long shadows as they stood before Henry's final resting place. "He must have been a good man," Adam said, "to inspire such loyalty." "He was," Katherine confirmed. "Kind. Hardworking, full of dreams." She touched the smooth surface of the boulder. "But I've realized something these past months. I've been mourning not just Henry, but the future we planned together, the children we never had, the farm that never prospered." Adam remained silent, letting her speak. "Standing here now," she continued, "I can finally say goodbye to those dreams. They died with Henry." She looked up at Adam, the gold ring catching the last light of day, but perhaps that means new dreams are possible. The tension between them was palpable as they walked back to the house in the gathering twilight. Katherine felt a strange nervousness, a fluttering awareness of Adam's tall figure beside her, the occasional brush of his arm against hers. At the porch steps, he paused. "I should return to the Circle M tomorrow. The owner's expecting a report." Disappointment washed over her. "Of course. But I've been thinking," Adam continued, his voice taking on an uncharacteristic hesitancy. "The Circle M needs supplies regularly from Cimarron. It would be a natural stopping point on my route to come by here. Check on your progress." "How often would these checks be necessary?" Katherine asked, a smile tugging at her lips. "Weekly, at minimum," Adam replied seriously, though his eyes held a warmth that made her breath catch. "Possibly more frequently as planting season progresses." "That seems very thorough of you, Mr. Keene." "I'm nothing if not thorough, Mrs. Norris." The formality of their address contrasted with the increasing intimacy of their gaze. For a breathless moment, Katherine thought he might step closer, might finally bridge the careful distance they'd maintained. Instead, he cleared his throat and gestured toward the door. "We should get some rest. Dawn comes early." That night, Katherine lay awake, the gold ring still on her finger where it had remained since Adam first gave it to her. Its presence felt different now, less a symbol of charity, and more a tangible connection to the man sleeping across the hall. A man who had, in just a few short weeks, begun to resurrect feelings she'd thought buried alongside her husband. True to his word, Adam departed after breakfast the next morning, promising to return within the week. This time, Watching him ride away felt different, a temporary absence rather than an uncertain goodbye. 3 days later, Katherine was startled by the approach of riders, 3 of them, moving fast and hard toward her farm. None had Adam's distinctive silhouette. Uneasiness prickled along her spine as she reached for Henry's old shotgun, keeping it hidden but ready as she stepped onto the porch. The men who dismounted in her yard bore the unmistakable look of trouble, unshaven, hard-eyed, with the watchful tension of predators. The leader, a tall man with a jagged scar across one cheek, approached the porch while his companions remained with the horses. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his politeness not reaching his cold eyes. "We're looking for a friend of ours. Thought he might have passed this way." "I don't get many visitors," Katherine replied evenly, keeping the shotgun hidden in the folds of her skirt. "This one would have been memorable," the man continued. "Tall fellow, about 30, goes by different names but might have introduced himself as Adam." Katherine's heart pounded, but she kept her expression neutral. "Can't say I've met anyone by that description recently." The man's eyes narrowed. "You sure about that? We heard in town he'd been seen heading this direction." "As I said, I don't get many visitors." Katherine straightened, channeling every ounce of her schoolteacher mother's authority. "Now, if you gentlemen need water for your horses, help yourselves to the trough. Otherwise, I have work to attend to." The man stared at her for a long moment before his gaze dropped to her hand, to the gold ring gleaming in the sunlight. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "That's a mighty fine ring for a farmer's widow," he observed. "Where'd you get something like that?" Katherine's grip tightened on the shotgun. "It was my mother's." "Is that so?" He smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Funny thing, my friend lost a ring just like that recently, right before he disappeared." "I'm sorry to hear that," Katherine replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But this ring has been in my family for years." The standoff stretched between them, tension crackling in the air. Finally, the man stepped back, touching the brim of his hat in a mocking gesture. "We'll be moving on then, but if you happen to see our friend, tell him Jenkins is looking for him. Tell him we've got unfinished business from Santa Fe." Santa Fe. The bank robbery. Katherine's mind raced as she watched the men ride away, urging their horses to a gallop once they cleared her property. Her hands trembled as she finally set down the shotgun, understanding blooming with terrible clarity. Adam's unexplained injury. His avoidance of towns. The generous advance on wages that matched almost exactly the amount a gold ring might fetch. The bank robbery had occurred just when Adam claimed to be arriving at the Circle M ranch. Katherine sank onto the porch step, the weight of possibility crushing her chest. Had she harbored a criminal? Had her growing feelings been for a man who didn't exist? The gold ring that had begun to symbolize hope now felt heavy with deception. Yet something didn't fit. The Adam she'd come to know, thoughtful, hardworking, gentle, didn't align with the brutal bank robbery that had left 3 men dead. She recalled his careful handling of injured animals, his patience with tangled irrigation systems, the respect with which he'd spoken of Henry's grave. As twilight descended, Katherine made her decision. She would confront Adam when, if he returned, she would demand the truth, no matter how painful. Until then, she would continue the work they'd started together. The wheat wouldn't plant itself, ring or no ring, truth or lies. 2 tense days passed. Katherine jumped at every distant sound, divided between hoping Adam would return and fearing what his return might reveal. She worked until exhaustion overcame worry, falling into dreamless sleep each night. On the 3rd evening, as she was closing the chicken coop, the sound of an approaching horse sent her heart racing. She moved quickly to the house, retrieving the shotgun before stepping onto the porch. The familiar silhouette of Adam appeared in the gathering dusk, but Katherine didn't lower the weapon. He noticed the shotgun immediately, reining his horse to a stop at a cautious distance. "Katherine, who are you?" she called, her voice remarkably steady despite her trembling hands. "Really?" Adam dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. I'm the man you know, Adam Keene. 3 men came looking for you. They mentioned Santa Fe, a bank robbery. The color drained from Adam's face, but he didn't flee. Instead, he approached cautiously, stopping at the foot of the porch steps. Did they hurt you? Answer my question, Katherine demanded. Are you a bank robber, a murderer? No, Adam replied firmly, but I know who is. He sighed deeply. May I explain? Without the shotgun pointed at my chest, Katherine hesitated, then lowered the weapon slightly. Start talking. My real name is Adam Keene, he began. I was a Pinkerton detective hired to infiltrate the Jenkins gang 6 months ago after they robbed 2 banks in Colorado. Katherine's grip on the shotgun loosened slightly. A detective? Adam nodded. I gained their trust, learned their methods. When they planned the Santa Fe job, I was supposed to alert the authorities. But Jenkins changed the timing at the last minute. I couldn't get word out. The newspaper said 3 men died, Katherine said. Pain flashed across Adam's features. I tried to stop them. Jenkins shot the teller when he wouldn't open the safe, then a guard. I managed to wound Jenkins, but his brother Caleb shot the bank manager before I could stop him. Adam's hands clenched at his sides. In the confusion, I took what cash I could grab and ran. I needed it to look like I was one of them. And the ring, Katherine asked, her voice softer, was my mother's, Adam confirmed. I've carried it for years. Giving it to you wasn't part of any deception, Katherine. I saw a woman in need and I wanted to help. Why didn't you tell me the truth? At first, because I didn't know you. Then, because I was afraid. His eyes held hers. Afraid of seeing exactly what I see now, doubt, fear. I was going to tell you everything once I reached the authorities in Santa Fe and made my report, clear my name officially. Katherine studied him, searching for lies in his earnest face. Why should I believe you? Because I came back, Adam said simply. I could have disappeared after learning Jenkins was tracking me. Instead, I came to warn you, knowing you might react exactly as you have. The simple logic of it, along with the undeniable fact that he had indeed returned despite the danger, began to chip away at Katherine's doubt. If what you say is true, you're still in danger, she observed. We both are if they come back. Adam nodded grimly. I need to reach the marshal in Cimarron, tell him everything. There's an army patrol searching for the gang. With my testimony, they can bring Jenkins to justice. Katherine finally lowered the shotgun completely. How do I know this isn't another story? That you won't disappear with whatever valuables I have left. Adam stepped closer, his expression open and vulnerable. You don't. You can only judge me by my actions. He gestured toward the fields they'd planted together. By the work of my hands, by whether my words match my deeds. Katherine thought of everything Adam had done since arriving at her farm, the repairs, the planting, the quiet conversations that had gradually rebuilt her faith in the future. Whatever his past, those actions had been real. I'll ride to Cimarron with you tomorrow, she decided. Hear what the marshal has to say. Relief washed over Adam's features. Thank you. That night, Adam slept in the barn despite Katherine's reluctant offer of the spare room. The distance between them felt necessary. As she sorted through her conflicted feelings, the growing affection for the man she'd come to know versus the lingering doubt about his story. Morning brought clarity along with the sunrise. As Katherine prepared a simple breakfast, she realized that truth rarely came without complexity. Whether Adam was exactly who he claimed or something more complicated, she had seen enough of his character to know he wasn't the cold-blooded killer Jenkins, and his gang had proven themselves to be. They rode to Cimarron in tense silence, the miles passing beneath steady hoofbeats. The small town appeared on the horizon by mid-afternoon, its dusty main street lined with the essential businesses of frontier life. At the marshal's office, Katherine waited outside while Adam spoke privately with the lawman. Through the window, she could see their serious expressions, the marshal taking notes, Adam's hands moving as he described something in detail. After what seemed an eternity, they emerged. Mrs. Norris, the marshal greeted her, tipping his hat. Marshal James Buchanan, I understand you've been harboring our undercover agent without realizing it. Is it true, then? Katherine asked. About the Pinkertons. Marshal Buchanan nodded. Mr. Keene has been working with law enforcement for nearly 2 years tracking the Jenkins gang. We received telegrams confirming his identity just last week, but hadn't been able to locate him to let him know he's been officially cleared of any suspicion in the Santa Fe robbery. Relief flooded through Katherine so powerfully she had to steady herself against a hitching post. Furthermore, the marshal continued, there's a $500 reward for information leading to the capture of the Jenkins gang. Given Mr. Keene's intelligence about their likely hideout, I expect that reward will be his once we bring them in. $500. It was a fortune in this territory enough to transform her struggling farm into a viable operation with livestock and proper equipment. The Army patrol is camped 10 miles south, Marshal Buchanan added. I'll ride out tonight with this information. With luck, we'll have the gang in custody within days. As they left the marshal's office, the weight of secrets and suspicion lifted from between them. Katherine glanced at Adam, seeing him truly for perhaps the first time not as a mysterious benefactor or potential threat, but as a man who had risked his life for justice. $500, she mused as they collected their horses. That's considerably more than 20. The corner of Adam's mouth lifted in a smile. I thought the 20 was quite generous at the time. It was, Katherine acknowledged. It saved my farm. Your hard work saved your farm, Adam corrected. The money just helped. As they rode back toward her homestead, a new ease settled between them. Adam spoke more freely about his work with the Pinkertons, how a chance encounter with a detective had led him from ranch work to law enforcement, the satisfaction of bringing criminals to justice. What will you do after Jenkins is captured? Katherine asked as they neared her property. Return to detective work? Adam was quiet for a long moment. I've been thinking about that. 7 years of chasing other men across the territories is enough. I meant what I said about the Circle M Ranch. The owner really did offer me the foreman position. I just haven't given him my answer yet. And what will that answer be? Katherine's heart beat faster as she awaited his response. That depends, Adam said softly, on whether I have a reason to stay in this part of the territory. The implication hung in the air between them as they dismounted in her yard. Katherine removed her gloves, the gold ring catching the late afternoon light. I should return this to you, she said, moving to slip it from her finger. Now that the truth is known. Adam stopped her with a gentle hand. Keep it, please. I can't accept such a valuable gift, Katherine protested. Then consider it a loan, Adam suggested, his eyes holding hers, until I can offer it properly. Katherine's breath caught at his meaning. Adam, the moment shattered at the sound of approaching riders, many of them, moving fast. Adam's expression changed instantly from tenderness to alarm. Get inside, he ordered, drawing his revolver. Now. Katherine didn't argue, rushing to retrieve her shotgun from where it rested against the porch. Through the window, she saw not the Jenkins gang as she'd feared, but a dozen men in Army uniforms, led by Marshal Buchanan. Adam holstered his weapon as the riders circled the yard. The marshal dismounted, his expression grim. Keene, he called. We need to move now. One of my deputies recognized Jenkins and his brother at a trading post 20 miles north. They're headed this way. Katherine stepped onto the porch, shotgun in hand. How many? 5 that we know of, the marshal replied. Mrs. Norris, you should come with us. It's not safe here. This is my home, Katherine stated firmly. I won't be driven from it. Adam moved to her side. Katherine, please. Jenkins is dangerous and desperate. She met his concerned gaze steadily. So am I. This farm is all I have left. I won't abandon it. A muscle worked in Adam's jaw as he struggled with her decision. Finally, he turned to the marshal. We make our stand here. The farmhouse has thick walls and clear lines of sight. Marshal Buchanan considered the strategic position of the house, then nodded. My men can create a perimeter. If Jenkins comes, we'll be ready." The next hours passed in tense preparation. The soldiers took positions around the property while Adam and Katherine fortified the house, boarding windows, stockpiling ammunition, preparing for a siege that might never come. As dusk approached, Adam found Katherine in the kitchen, loading shotgun shells with steady hands. "You should reconsider," he said quietly. "Ride to Cimarron with 2 of the soldiers. I'd feel better knowing you were safe." Katherine continued her work without looking up. "When Henry died, I nearly gave up. Every day was just surviving until the next. Then you arrived with bread when I was hungry and hope, when I'd forgotten what it felt like." She finally met his gaze. "I won't run from this fight, Adam, not when I've finally found something worth fighting for." The raw honesty in her words stripped away the last of his professional detachment. Adam moved closer, taking the ammunition from her hands and setting it aside. "Katherine," he began, then stopped, words seemingly inadequate. Instead, he cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her gently at first, then with increasing urgency as she responded, her arms twining around his neck. The kiss spoke of possibilities, of futures not yet written, of promises waiting to be made. When they finally parted, breathless, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he whispered, "I'd like to court you properly, if you'll allow it." Katherine smiled, the first true smile in longer than she could remember. "I think we're well beyond the courting stage, Mr. Keene." A shout from outside interrupted their moment. Riders approaching from the north. The battle came swift and furious. Jenkins and his men, realizing too late they'd ridden into a trap, fought with the desperation of cornered wolves. Gunfire echoed across the formerly peaceful farm as soldiers exchanged shots with the outlaws who had taken cover behind the barn and outbuildings. Katherine proved her mettle, calmly reloading Adam's rifle as he picked off one of the gang members attempting to circle behind the house. When a stray bullet shattered the kitchen window, she didn't flinch, just moved to a safer position and continued supporting the defense. The tide turned when Jenkins himself made a bold dash toward the house, perhaps hoping to take hostages. Adam stepped onto the porch, revolver raised. "It's over, Jenkins," he called. "Throw down your weapons." The outlaw leader fired wildly, his shots splintering wood around Adam but missing their mark. Adam's return fire was precise, catching Jenkins in the shoulder and spinning him to the ground. Within moments, the remaining gang members surrendered, throwing down their weapons as soldiers closed in from all sides. Marshal Buchanan personally clapped irons on Jenkins, who glared at Adam with pure hatred. "You're a dead man, Keene," he spat. "Might take years, but I'll find you." Adam holstered his weapon. "Where you're going, the only thing you'll find is the inside of a prison cell, or the end of a rope." As the prisoners were led away and the soldiers began to depart, Katherine surveyed the damage to her farm. Bullet holes riddled the barn, the chicken coop had been partially collapsed during the fighting, and her garden had been trampled by horses. "It can be rebuilt," Adam said, coming to stand beside her. "All of it." "Yes," Katherine agreed, surprising herself with her lack of despair. "It can." Marshal Buchanan approached them, holding out an official-looking document. "Mr. Keene, this authorizes payment of the reward, $500 as promised. You can collect it at the bank in Cimarron whenever you're ready." Adam accepted the paper, then looked at Katherine. "Would you object to a business proposition, Mrs. Norris?" She raised an eyebrow. "What kind of proposition?" "An investment," he replied. $500 in exchange for a partnership in this farm." "That's a very generous offer," Katherine said carefully. "But what would you expect in return for such an investment?" Adam's eyes held a warmth that had nothing to do with business, only what you're willing to give. Marshal Buchanan cleared his throat awkwardly. "I'll just check on the prisoners. Good day, Mrs. Norris." When they were alone, Katherine gestured toward the farmhouse, riddled with bullet holes but still standing. "It's not much of a property at the moment." "It's not the property I'm interested in," Adam said softly. Katherine touched the gold ring that still circled her finger. And what about the Circle M Ranch, the foreman position? I've been thinking about that, Adam replied. The territory needs lawmen as much as ranch foremen. Marshal Buchanan mentioned he could use a deputy in Cimarron, close enough to ride home each night. Home, Katherine repeated, the word filling with new meaning. Adam took her hands in his. I know it's sudden. We've known each other barely a month, but out here, life doesn't always give us the luxury of time. His eyes searched hers. I've never met anyone like you, Katherine Norris. Your strength, your determination. I'd be honored to build something with you, a farm, a family, a future. Katherine thought of Henry, of the dreams they'd shared, the future cut short by cruel fate. She'd loved him truly, mourned him deeply. But standing before her was a chance she never thought to have again, a man who saw her not just as a widow to be pitied, but as a partner to be cherished. It won't be easy, she warned. This land demands everything you have. So do you, Adam replied with a smile, and I'm prepared to give it. Katherine squeezed his hands. Then yes, to the partnership, to all of it. Adam's joy was evident as he pulled her close, sealing their agreement with a kiss that promised tomorrows neither had dared imagine weeks before. The rebuilding began immediately. With the reward money, they purchased cattle, repaired buildings, and hired temporary help to get the farm fully operational. Adam split his time between deputy duties in Cimarron and working the land, while Katherine managed the day-to-day operations with growing confidence. They were married that autumn in a simple ceremony at the newly constructed church in Cimarron. Katherine wore her mother's dress, carefully preserved through the journey west, and Adam wore a new suit purchased for the occasion. The gold ring that had first passed between them as charity was officially presented as a symbol of their union. Their first winter together brought challenges: snowstorms that isolated the farm for weeks, cattle lost to wolves, a leak in the roof of their bedroom that required midnight repairs. But it also brought joys neither had expected: evenings reading aloud by lamplight, Adam teaching Katherine to play chess, the comfortable silence of two people who no longer needed words to communicate. Spring arrived with promise. The wheat fields Adam had helped plant the previous year yielded a bountiful harvest. Katherine's garden produced more vegetables than they could eat, allowing them to preserve and trade the excess. The chicken coop, rebuilt and expanded, housed 3 times the original flock. On a warm evening in late May, they sat on the porch, the same porch where a hungry widow had once accepted bread from a kind stranger. Adam had just returned from 3 days in Cimarron, helping the marshal with a land dispute. I've been thinking, Katherine said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. We should add a room to the house, for the future. Adam looked at her questioningly, then understanding dawned. His face transformed with wonder as he knelt before her chair, placing his hand gently over hers. Are you certain? He asked, voice thick with emotion. Katherine nodded, tears of joy gathering in her eyes. The doctor in Cimarron confirmed it yesterday. By Christmas, we'll be 3 instead of 2. Adam gathered her in his arms, his joy too great for words. As the sun set over their thriving farm, Katherine thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, from hunger to plenty, from emptiness to fulfillment, from a widow's despair to a wife's contentment. The gold ring gleamed on her finger, no longer a symbol of charity, but of love freely given and joyfully received. What had begun with bread shared between strangers had grown into a bond that would sustain them through whatever challenges the untamed territory might present. As stars appeared in the vast New Mexico sky, Katherine and Adam Keene looked toward the future they would build together, not just a farm, but a legacy for the child growing beneath her heart and the generations that would follow. Their daughter, Emma Grace Keene, was born on a snowy December night in 1884, her father pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door while the local midwife attended Katherine. When Adam was finally allowed to enter, the sight of his wife cradling their newborn daughter brought him to his knees beside the bed. She has your eyes, Katherine whispered, exhausted but radiant. Adam touched his daughter's tiny hand with reverent fingers. "And your strength. I can tell already." The farm prospered as their family grew. 2 years after Emma's birth, Katherine delivered twin boys, Henry, named for the husband she had loved and lost, and James, for the marshal who had helped bring Adam safely back to her. The children thrived in the clean air and open spaces of the New Mexico territory, learning to ride almost before they could walk. Adam eventually resigned his deputy position to focus entirely on their expanding ranch. His reputation for fairness and hard work spread throughout the territory, bringing offers of partnership and investment. With careful management and Katherine's sharp business sense, they gradually acquired adjacent properties, transforming the once struggling homestead into one of the most successful operations in the region. In 1890, the year New Mexico moved toward statehood, they built a new house larger, sturdier, with rooms for each child and a proper parlor for entertaining. But Katherine insisted on incorporating the original farmhouse into the design, preserving the porch where a hungry widow had once sat with empty hands, and a kind cowboy had offered bread and hope for the future. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Adam presented Katherine with a new ring to accompany the simple gold band that had first passed between them, this one featuring a proper diamond that caught the light like a star. Yet Katherine treasured the original more, for all it represented in their shared journey, as they watched their children race across fields that now yielded abundant harvests each year. Adam wrapped his arm around Katherine's waist, pulling her close against the autumn chill. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" he asked. "If I hadn't stopped that day," Katherine leaned into his embrace, the solid warmth of him still a daily comfort after a decade together. "I believe some paths are meant to cross, no matter what choices we make. But I'm grateful every day that you stopped, and I was brave enough to accept what you offered." "Bread and a ring," Adam mused, smiling at the memory. "And a future I couldn't have imagined," Katherine added, turning in his arms to face him. The years had added silver threads to his dark hair and fine lines around his eyes, but he was still the handsomest man she'd ever known. "I love you, Adam Keene, more with each passing year." "And I love you, Katherine Keene," he replied, using the name she had taken as his wife but still pronounced with the same reverence as when she had been Mrs. Norris. "More than I have words to express." As they sealed their anniversary with a kiss, Emma called from the house that supper was ready, the twins echoing her announcement with characteristic enthusiasm. Hand in hand, they walked toward the home they had built together, not just walls and a roof, but a haven of love that had grown from the simplest of beginnings. Bread shared between strangers, a gold ring passed from one empty hand to another, and the courage to believe in new beginnings when all seemed lost. In the years that followed, their legend grew throughout the territory. People spoke of the Keene Ranch with respect and admiration, not just for its prosperity, but for the family that had created it from nearly nothing. Their story of a widow saved from starvation by a passing cowboy who became a lawman, then a rancher, then a pillar of the community became part of local folklore, embellished with each telling until it took on the quality of myth. But Katherine and Adam knew the truth was more precious than any legend, that their greatest achievement wasn't the ranch or their standing in society, but the love they had built day by day, choice by choice, sacrifice by sacrifice. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and responsibilities temporarily set aside, they would sit together on the porch where their story began, her hand in his, the original gold ring still bright after all the years, witnessing to a truth they had discovered together. That even in the harshest territories of life, love could take root and flourish if given the chance.